Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of IGN Unfiltered, my monthly interview show where I sit down with the best, brightest, most interesting people in the video game industry. My guest this month is none other than the original Chief Xbox Officer himself, Robbie Bach. Thanks for coming.
It's good to be here, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
So, there's a lot to unpack with you. You've written a book. You're not here for your health. You've written a book. It's called Xbox Revisited. I'm going to show it to both cameras.
Right.
And the book is it's sort of a two-part book, effectively. It covers the early days at Xbox, the original Xbox, a lot of 360 stuff, the sort of game plan for 360, which turned out to be such a successful console. And then it gets into your sort of post-retirement passion, which is adhering to the Civic Call of Duty that you have heard, and this newfound life, a lot of stuff with the Boys and Girls Club, et cetera, et cetera. But let's start back at the beginning.
Sure.
You managed to retire at 49 after being at Microsoft for 22 years.
Right.
But in that time, you did a lot at the company, but of course the reason you're here, the reason that IGN fans care is the Xbox.
Right.
How does a guy such as yourself, who you don't have a background in video games, you're very much, you have a business background, how do you end up with the keys to the Xbox in your hands?
Well, it's a little bit of one of those things of serendipity, right? We're at an executive staff retreat, a guy who worked for me, Rick Thompson, who ran Microsoft's hardware business at the time, mice and keyboards, and Barney, if you remember Interactive Barney. But Rick was a great guy, and he raised this question, should Microsoft do a game console? And so we had a small breakout session that Bill Gates came and attended, and that led to about 3 or 4 months of investigation. Bill came back to Rick and to Steve Ballmer and said, hey, I think technically this is interesting. Do you guys think it can be a business? Steve asked Rick to do it. Rick was working for me, so I'm spending 10% of my time on this. And Rick's full out. For 6 months, he's doing an investigation, blah, blah, blah. In December, the project gets approved. And shortly thereafter, Rick decided he wanted to leave Microsoft. And so he went to a startup that he had helped fund. And suddenly I became the head of Xbox. And whatever else I was doing went to somebody else. And I went from 10% to 100% Xbox. And it was very early in the project. There were probably 40 people on the team at that point.
Yeah.
And from there, it became 10 years of love and passion.
So you cover in the book your parents, very intellectual people. How do they react when you tell them, hey, guess what? I'm working at Microsoft, but now I'm actually going to be running this video game business.
Well, my dad was an engineer, so at least at a technical level, he thought that was sort of cool.
Yeah.
And the family, and my mom in particular, just said, wow, it's an interesting business. And this is where my passion is on the business side. And so when you explain to them that, yes, it's cool, yes, it's this cutting edge form of entertainment and all those kinds of things, but then when I was able to talk about, well, this is why I'm passionate about it, they got it, and they got behind it. And of course, for my son, who was 13 at the time, this was the greatest thing that had ever happened in life because he got all the beta products and he was playing Xbox.
What kind of NDA do you have to sign your son to? Your own son, your own flesh and blood at that point.
I know plenty of stories about him. I have control over the TV time, so I had no problem with that.
So the book covers, which by the way, all proceeds from the book are going to charity.
That's right.
You are not doing this to line your own pockets.
Right.
You were in New York on 9/11 on an Xbox tour.
Right.
You're gearing up for the launch of the original Xbox. You had flown in that morning.
Right.
And you mentioned in the book that 9/11 became a very transformative moment for you in your life, and in a real way, like in a sense that because that's where you sort of had your civic awakening,
right,
as you've put it, that you're now very involved with Boys and Girls Club and various sort of other civic initiatives. When 9/11 happens, do with all due respect to games, do video games just kind of seem dumb to you at that point?
No, it's really interesting. When I was growing up, I was a civic-minded high schooler, which sounds a little geeky and weird, but that's the way it was.
That's all of us.
That's the way I was. And I thought I wanted to be a U.S. Senator.
Yeah.
I went to undergraduate school, went into banking, went to business school, and found a love for business. And so the civic stuff just sort of went aside.
Yeah.
9/11 brought that back to me. And I didn't even realize it at the time. When you're in an experience like 9/11, we were driving across the country. We were just trying to get home. I just want to see my wife and my kids.
Yeah, nobody could fly home. For people that are young enough, flights were grounded for a week nationwide.
Yeah.
So
and cell phones. Look, 2001, cell phones weren't as ubiquitous as they are today.
Right.
And so communication was hard. I just want to get home to my family. But as I reflected on it, and as you started to think about it, it really made me say, hey, there's a calling here for me someplace. And when I retired from Microsoft, I actually started a new career.
Yeah.
And that new career was what I call civic engineering.
But so was 9/11 the day that did you, on some level, either consciously or subconsciously, begin sort of planning the next phase of your life right then?
No, I don't think so. I think right at that moment, again, Xbox, as I describe in the book, was all engrossing.
Yeah.
And frankly, in bad shape. Right? I mean,
the run-up.
The run-up to the first launch.
The E3 Halo was running rough. And
E3 was a disaster. That's only one word to describe that, and it was a disaster on all fronts. And not because the team didn't work hard, but it just was bad. We were leading up to a launch. We weren't sure the hardware was going to get done. The software was coming in hot. People were just starting to work on real dev kits, which is crazy. Yeah. And so that was sort of all engrossing. And once we got past that, we started to think about the future of the business. Then I had a little bit more time to step back and sort of evaluate my life. And it was about a year later where I said, I love Microsoft, I love Xbox. I'm going to keep doing this for a while. I want to play this out, but there's something else that I'm going to want to do.
Yeah.
And when that time comes, I'll be ready for it.
So let's one more bit of 9/11 here.
Sure.
You mentioned, you just touched on it. You ended up renting a car with a handful of people that you were there with from Microsoft, and you drove back across the country back to Seattle.
Yeah.
To get home. You stopped at. You mentioned you talk about a GameStop clerk that you befriended in the Dakotas and kept in touch with.
It's a great story. We are there's 4 of us in the car. There's 3 people from Microsoft, including myself, and a guy from my church who happened to be in New York. We're driving across, and we stop at the Mount Rushmore Mall in Rapid City, South Dakota, because we got to get food. So we had Chinese food. That was a mistake. So Chinese food at Mount Rushmore Mall, do not recommend it. We got pillows at Target because we were going to drive through the night. And then as we're coming out, it actually was called a software etc.
Back then,
at the time,
that's right.
which then became EB, which then became GameStop. So the software etc. clerk's name, Derek Barnes, is in the store, and they have all the Xbox stuff up. This is about 3 months before we're shipping. And so we started chatting with him, and the guy knew a lot. He was talking about NFL Fever. Who wants to forget NFL Fever? He was talking about Halo. He was talking about a couple other things. And so I gave him my business card. He sent me an email. We emailed for probably 10, 12 years
That's
after
great.
That. He went on to work in an IT department, had a family. Presumably, Derek, if you're out there, contact me again. I'd love to catch up with you. I think he's really doing
your
great.
Microsoft address doesn't work anymore.
Well, yeah, he can contact me at bachfamily@live.com, or he can go to the website. Derek, if you see this, give me a shout.
So during that drive back, besides befriending Derek, I'm curious, did you have any kind of epiphanies? Because that's a lot of time to think on a 53-hour drive. I presume you probably took turns or something. But do any sort of strategic business strategy epiphanies occur to you at that time? Things that we can kind of look back on and go, oh, that idea to do that came from that drive home.
No, but I think one thing did come from that drive home. I had just gone through this period, which I describe in the book, where I tried to resign from Microsoft.
Yeah.
And
they wouldn't let you.
And they wouldn't let me, nicely, so that was good. And I sort of realized where things fit in the grand scheme of life, right? When the country's being attacked and you can't fly and you feel isolated from your family, you step back and you say, okay, what I do for a living is important. So I care about it, and I'm going to do it well. But it's not worth having a crisis over. Life will go on. I will, if we're successful, that's great. If we're not successful, I'll work hard to make it successful. But it gave me a little bit of peace. It gave me the ability to sort of get through launch, and it was perhaps the starting point for me figuring out how to reshape my next 10 years.
It was effectively like therapy for you at that point. Then it was like a therapeutic realization.
It was, and it was the start of that. And then as I talk in the book, we went to see some family coaches who helped my wife and I really think about, okay, work's important to you. You care, you're passionate about it, but you care about your family. How do you make those things work? And so it really was the beginning of that healing process. It was kind of cool.
You talk a lot about Jay Allard in your book, who, Jay, if you're out there, Please, come on. I've tried to find him. I can't find him. Nobody can find him. He's on a mountain in Oregon somewhere.
Someplace, that's right.
Anyway, he was, of course, he was effectively your co-pilot on the Xbox adventure.
Absolutely.
He, of course, was the more, I guess, public-facing of the two of you. Typically, the Xbox 360
certainly in the
reveal
gaming community. Certainly in the gaming community,
right.
He and Ed Freeze were the two public faces.
And it sounds like the two of you really complemented each other very, very well. And by that, you kind of each brought different strengths to the table.
That's right.
But it also sounded like you butted heads a lot.
Well, so Jay and I are both very opinionated. We're very stubborn. And so, he had opinions about stuff that I felt like I knew a lot about.
Yeah.
I had opinions about stuff that I know he knew a lot about. And so there was always this yin and yang thing. And I think it was actually sort of constructive confrontation, right? We'd butt heads on things, and I'd learn a little bit about the things I was supposed to be focusing on
right.
from him, and he'd learn a little bit from me. And so it ended up being quite productive, but it wasn't peaceful. And sometimes you see partners who work together. I have a business partner now I work with, and we're very simpatico. We think a lot alike, and it's easy. Jay's and my relationship was never easy, but it was always hugely productive. We managed to get along.
Like a lot of rock bands, really, right? Where you got these, and when they break up, you go, "How could you break up? It's a gravy train." You guys managed to keep it together. I mean, what did Jay mean for your career at Microsoft?
Well, I think a couple of things. First of all, he brought such passion and vision around a concept and a idea. For me as a business guy, I looked at problems as, okay, this is a business problem, I need to solve it, I need to sell it, I need to market it, whatever it is. Jay thought about it as a quest. For Jay, it was, there's a North Star and we're going to take the team there.
Yeah.
And that to me was a different way of thinking about things and really changed the way I thought about approaching team management, leadership, and other types of things. The other thing that I learned from Jay, and I talk about this at great length in the book, is the huge power of simplicity. For all of his grand visions and paths that he wanted to take us on, Jay was an incredible thinker at, no, we just have to do these few things.
Yeah.
And if we do those few things, the rest will take care of itself. And that to me was a powerful lesson.
Yeah, well, I foolishly didn't write it down, but here it is. Yeah, because your whole business plan is like you boil it down to a 3-page thing, right?
Yeah, we had this epic offsite at a place called Salish Lodge. Peter Moore, Jay, myself, a few other people, and we basically were arguing about the future of Xbox and how we were going to tell the team what to do with Xbox 360. And this is 2002.
Yeah.
So early on. And Jay really pushed the point. He said, we got to be able to write it in 3 pages. If we can't write it in 3 pages, it's useless to the team. And so that's what we did. And from that came the 3P framework, purpose, principles, and priorities that I use for the book. It's what I use in my nonprofit work. It's what I use in my civic and engineering work. And it's a powerful, simple framework for getting people to focus and to decide what's important and make sure that gets done.
What's Bill Gates like in quote unquote real life? Because we only ever see the sort of the occasional on stage Bill Gates, the now like humanitarian Bill Gates.
Right.
But I've had some of your colleagues and other Microsoft folks on the show who've told some Bill Gates stories, and I guess he wasn't afraid of the occasional 4-letter word, of getting fired up in a meeting, getting things done. What's Bill Gates like?
The thing I'll say about Bill is he's intensely competitive. He and Steve, between the two of them, had so much competitive spirit in them. So, when things happen in meetings and when he got...
And you're talking about Ballmer, not Jobs, although
correct.
It could apply to Jobs as well.
I think it applied to all 3 of them, actually. But yes, I was talking about Ballmer. But when Bill was in a meeting and he was being demonstrative, it wasn't because he didn't like you. It was because he cared.
Yeah.
It's because he wanted to win and because he wanted it to be right. And what I found is... in big group meetings, that was hard to manage because he was, often right, most of the time right, and upset for good reason. And so you're trying to manage the team dynamics and work with Bill at the same time. It's not easy. And so I spent a lot of time with Bill in smaller groups where he was amazing. Just as competitive, just as fierce, just as demonstrative. But at a personal level, even more effective. And I found, as an individual, when you get time to spend with him, he's really smart. He's actually quite funny. He has a great sense of humor.
Like off-color sense of humor?
No, like cut with a knife, dry wit sense of humor. He's very, very funny, but competitive and wants to win. And look, Xbox owes a lot to the team and to Jay and other people, but Bill played his role. He played an important role in our success.
So again, the book here is Xbox Revisited. Get it at RobbieBach.com, B-A-C-H, Robbie Bach, and all the proceeds are going to charity on that. We'll get to the 360, which you just touched on, but the original Xbox.
Right.
Something of a ragtag project. If you go back and watch Podcast Unlocked 201 from last year, with Seamus Blackley, Phil Spencer, and Peter Moore, Seamus tells a lot of good stories. What's your fondest memory of the original Xbox?
Fondest memory is E3. I think it's 2003.
Halo 2?
No, it's actually EA on Xbox Live.
That was big. Muhammad Ali
on stage, and it was also apropos to today's time when we had Donald Trump in a video doing our takeoff on The Apprentice with Sony versus Microsoft.
Forgot about that.
That was just a fun day. Right, doing the video was crazy in New York. We flew to New York. We did it. Donald was there. He came and did it with us. It was Peter, Jay, and I. We had a lot of fun doing it. Then we go to E3. Muhammad Ali backstage was incredible. It was an uplifting moment for Xbox. Right, we were starting to come out, and people were starting to say, "Hey, this thing has some traction."
Yeah,
and we were sort of past the doldrums. It was just personally a very gratifying and fun day.
Yeah. You talk about Japan being important to the Xbox effort, but obviously it never quite worked out in Japan. In hindsight, is there anything you think you could have done differently to get Xbox a strong foothold in Japan?
It's a really good question. I've thought about it a lot. In the grand scheme of what we were doing, the short answer is I don't think so, and that's not a statement about Japan or about us or about Sony or Nintendo. It's just a question of focus, and it's a question of where you have assets and where you don't have assets. And we had no assets in Japan, right? We were building a team. It was a young team, became a very good team, but at the beginning it struggled. We didn't have the relationships with Japanese game developers. Sony and Nintendo.
Inagaki, Ninja Gaiden, but
we did.
A few isolated
ones, but even those wouldn't have been games that you would have said they were actually more popular in the West than they were in Japan.
That's true.
And so we, deeply into the Japanese gaming culture, we just weren't there. And without getting there, success was going to be really tough. And so if I had to do it over again, ironically, I'd spend just enough to make sure we kept ourselves engaged with Japanese companies and Japanese developers for what they wanted to do in the West, but probably spend a little bit less time on it because it distracted us from things where we actually had an opportunity to make progress.
Right.
Really tough. 360 was much better, still challenged, but much better. And we had better assets, a better team, better engagement, more credibility. The senior leadership in the Japanese game companies turned over a bit at that point, and you had a few younger people leading companies who were a little bit more Western in their thought. That made it a little easier.
Final Fantasy came to the
Final
360.
Fantasy came to the product, and so there were 360 was better, but Xbox, it's just really hard. I always tell people it's the only market I've ever been in where we had negative market share. We were taking more in returns than we were selling into the market. That's really hard.
For the 360,
right?
Can you tell me this is purely indulge my own curiosity. What were some of the other finalists for the name? Because 360 at the time was kind of a weird name.
Yeah,
it seems very normal now, but do you remember what some of the finalists for the name of that system were?
I'll remember. I'm going to say, if Peter Moore were here, or next time you see him, he will remember the long list. He'll remember all 10 of them.
I'll ask him for sure.
He's wonderful about this guy, and he was running the marketing team at the time. Certainly Xbox 3 was actually on the list. Because
skipping 2?
Well, you got to catch up. You don't want to be Xbox 2 compared to PlayStation 3. We actually talked about that. Right. You don't want to feel like you're a generation behind. So, why not skip? Look, Windows Office skipped numbers.
Windows skipped 9. There is no Windows 9.
No Windows 9. Microsoft has a long history of skipping numbers. So that's the one I remember. And we had a naming agency. for both the original Xbox and for 360. And in the original case, they didn't come back with anything that was better than what we were using.
You paid them a bunch of money for nothing.
You covered the landscape, and they did a bunch of trademark searches for us, which is quite helpful. For 360, it just, it was the best of the names, and it felt right. The truth is, on this naming stuff, it doesn't matter that much.
Doesn't matter that much.
I mean, if you can name something the Wii and sell it in the United States and in Europe and be very successful with it, how important can the name actually be, right? When that name came out, everybody laughed. They made all the appropriate jokes.
But when you type it into Google, that's the only thing that comes up, right?
Right, exactly. And by the way,
or Bing.
It's okay. It's a very successful product.
Yeah.
And so, in the end, we probably spent too much time on naming.
Interesting.
Ultimately.
All right.
And by the way, if you can go back to Xbox One, all rules are broken, right?
That's true.
Right.
It's all bets are off for whatever the next version.
Who knows what they're going to call that?
So the 360 was, by your own admission, you don't publish the actual. You keep the internal projections confidential, but you do say in the book that the 360 beat your wildest internal expectations.
Not even in the same time zone.
You are clear in the book that you felt good that you had a strong plan and you executed it well, but were you guys shocked at Sony's moves with PS3, the whole, coming out a year later, the $599 thing?
The year later didn't surprise us. I mean, we knew.
Yeah, you wanted to be first.
We wanted to be first. Well, we wanted to make sure, originally, remember, we chose this date in 2002. Yeah. So at the time, you don't know what they're going to do. We just said, it's a 5 or 6 year cycle. This is when they launch. So the earliest they're going to launch is 2005. We have to be there when they launch that.
Right.
Worst case, we have to be at the same time. So that's what got us to 2005. As we got closer, we weren't surprised it was going to be 2006, just because of the complexity of the cell processor and what they were trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
So that part didn't surprise us at all. I will tell you, the single moment when I knew we had real upside was when they announced their pricing at E3. I mean, literally.
That was a shock to you?
Oh,
you had
total shock.
No idea?
Total shock. We knew their product, their bill of materials was going to be too expensive, but we thought they'd suck it up.
Yeah.
And we're literally, they wouldn't let most of us into the room for the presentation. That's just the way E3 works. It's fine.
Business.
It's fine. So we're watching it on and again, things weren't live broadcast then, old technology. So we're watching on some feed. I don't even know what feed it was, but it was really bad and we couldn't tell. And so Kaz said the price. And the room we were in went silent. And I said, did he really say what I think he said? And so we started contacting people who were in the room to get confirmation that the price was actually the price he'd actually said.
Yeah.
And when we confirmed that, I said absolutely in my mind, and many of us said out loud, oh, this could be really fun.
Did you just say that did you think you won in that moment?
No, you never think you win. When you have 20% market share and they have 60, you never think you've won, right? That's the kiss of death. But I did say, okay, we got a real chance. There's real upside here.
Yeah.
If we push hard, we can really make a difference.
You say in the book, quote, Xbox Live is by far the most important element in the Xbox success story. What did Live do for the present and future of the Xbox business at that time?
Well, I think the first thing it did is it was one of the major places where we provided real innovation and new ideas to the industry. I mean, people forget, in 2002, MySpace didn't exist.
Right.
Forget Facebook. MySpace didn't exist.
Broadband was in its infancy.
Well, broadband's in its infancy. So the idea that you're going to have a social network of people engaging in an activity online on a regular basis is marginally crazy. And so it really brought, there'd been online gaming before. If you knew somebody's IP address, you could go meet with them.
Right.
But this was a revolutionary idea, that we were going to have a social, community-based gaming experience online. So first of all, there's an innovation point that I think is really, really important. The second thing is it changed the business model completely. So now we're not just dependent on selling games. We have a subscription revenue, we have advertising revenue, we have retail revenue. And all of those things have continued to grow and become more important. Every year it got more important. And so now you have a sustainable business that isn't reliant on hardware and first-party games.
The razor blade.
Well, now you have a razor, some razor blades, and then just another business.
A box of cash.
Just another business.
It fills itself.
Just another business. And it has real cost. It takes real work.
Yeah, of course.
It's not cheap, but it's sustainable. And by the way, it carries from console to console.
which had never been done before.
Super powerful.
Yeah.
So that to me is what, and if you look at their business today, and they don't disclose all the numbers, but my guess is that Xbox Live is the most important part of the business today.
Yeah, because to be clear, if so, Robbie, you left prior to the Xbox One even.
Yeah, I think I advised them about a week before I left at their first exploratory meeting.
Yeah.
So not a lot of contact with that product.
So for the 360, because you got to work on a lot of different products over the course of your time at Microsoft. We see a couple of them on the wall here.
Yeah, that Zune thing. That's good.
Is the 360 the proudest achievement in your career product-wise?
There'd really be two.
Yeah.
Honestly, I played a different role in the creation of Office. I was first a mid-level and then eventually a senior person in marketing for Office. And we took a product that had 5% market share and took it to 90% market share over some period of time. And there's a bunch of people who deserve most of the credit for that, but playing a role in it and seeing it happen to me was really pretty amazing. And then 360 and the Xbox experience itself certainly are right there with that. There's other products that I was actually quite proud of, but not because of their commercial success. I mean, even Zune, from a thought leadership perspective, if you think about Zune, the Zune music service is Spotify 5 years before Spotify.
That's fair.
And so I'm proud of that.
Yeah, of course.
It's another one of Jay's creations. Now, the business I'm not proud of, we messed it up. That happens.
You mentioned in the book that there was for years there was these rumors about an X-Boy handheld.
Right.
You mentioned in the book you decided against it.
Right.
You do mention that you decided against it. How far did any of the proposals get? Is there a prototype of it? Is there a shell somewhere?
No, there's no. I don't recall there ever being a prototype. There were drawings.
Yeah.
Oh, there were definitely drawings. And there were, how
would
would
it work? Can you give me those?
Yeah, I don't have it. The funny thing is, I didn't save very much stuff. It's really kind of disappointing. When I think about the book, I said, well, maybe I should put a bunch of pictures in there. And I didn't have as many pictures as I thought I did. I didn't have as much material as I thought. But X-Boy multiple times came as a project. And it wasn't always called X-Boy, it was X something, but it was a handheld gaming device. Yeah. And the theory was we got to play in that part of the ecosystem. And we didn't do it because we just couldn't focus. We just did not have the bandwidth.
That's what you talk about in the book, is it would have just detracted from the 360.
And Xbox and 360 were so challenged at that time. So for us, it was a focus issue. Not as it turned out strategically, it was a smart decision. But that's somewhat accidental. The real thing was, gosh, that's interesting, but we just can't do it.
And it seems like history has proven your decision correct, that, of course, with smartphones now, the handheld market would have been...
Well, that's why I say, I think history proved me correct in one case and lucky in another. Correct in the sense that focusing on 360 was absolutely the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Lucky in the sense that forced me to make a decision that turned out to be right because smartphones took over that marketplace. And I would not claim, and I don't know there was anybody on the team that would claim to say, oh, we knew smartphones were coming, therefore we didn't do it. Sometimes you do things for the right reason and it ends up being a really good decision.
Yeah. Now, $399 turned out to be such a sweet spot for the Xbox 360 price. All the enthusiast gamers were willing to pay it, and it just worked out. And Sony, of course, suffered at $599, at least certainly in the early going, until they could drive their price down. Were you surprised then when the Xbox One launched at $499?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about talk about $399 just for a minute.
Yeah.
That was controversial even within Microsoft, because remember, that was the first console at $399.
True.
And so what we did was this dual SKU strategy. People forget we had a console at $299 and the premium. And so we sort of covered our bases both ways.
Nobody wanted the cheaper one, though.
Well, actually, sales were higher than you'd think.
Okay.
There were, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but 30, 35, 40%.
I guess just in the enthusiast community, nobody.
Correct. All the hardcore gamers bought the $399 version, but a lot of families bought the $299 version. And so that was a nice mix. So what surprised me with the Xbox One, $499 certainly surprised me, but what really surprised me is they chose just $499. And I know the reason for that is they wanted to have Kinect in every box, but it sort of didn't leave them much of a safety net. And for us, $299 was a safety net on what we considered to be a risky bet at $399.
What do you think of the console landscape now? You've been retired for going on 6 years now. What do you think of the Xbox One, the PS4, the Wii U, the rumors, the Nintendo NX, the rumors of PlayStation 4.5? What do you think of the landscape now?
Well, to me, the interesting thing about the gaming landscape generally, even beyond consoles, is it's never been a bigger or better business. It's now a rich form of entertainment. You've got esports, you have TV shows, you have mobile games, PC games, Xbox games, online universes. It's so cool to see the interesting, and this is going to sound funny, but to see it have grown up into such a crazy great place. So that to me is the first thing. It's really exciting. The second thing is people think consoles are a smaller part of the business, and mathematically as a percentage that's true, but the console market's never been bigger. Right? PlayStation 4 and Xbox 360 have sold more units to date than any previous generation of consoles at this stage of the life cycle.
Yeah.
And so you kind of look at that and you say, wow, so smaller part of the larger ecosystem, but a big growing business. That's really cool. And to me, it just tells you that this industry is driven by creativity. And in the creative space, you just don't know what's going to happen next. And the things that do come from the creative side of the house are what drive the industry.
Would you have, if you were still running the Xbox business, would you have handled the Xbox One any differently?
It's a really unfair question. It's a really unfair question. With no offense.
I don't mean any disrespect to you or to anybody there. It's just interesting because you did run the business, so I'm curious,
Well, the thing I hope, there were some things that they did that I think they tried to do new things and they didn't work out. Peace. You can decide those were the right things or the wrong things, but they didn't work out. Okay.
Yeah.
There were some things that happened that I think we had learned lessons before that maybe they should have already learned. And I think that's not saying something that's not blindingly obvious, I suppose. So I'd hope I would have remembered those lessons, but you don't know. I think the thing for people who are watching this to really understand, when you're in the crucible, it's all different, right? There's no objectivity, right? You've been close to a project for 3 or 4 years.
It is your life.
And it is your life. You set out with an objective. It's like a game that ships and people say, well, that was a bad game. Why'd you ship it? And the answer is, no, I was close to the game. There are things I loved about the game. I thought we were doing the right thing. I thought it could work.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody ships something that they think is abject bad. So that's what happens. And you get close, and it's hard to pull back. Look, first version of the Xbox, I know that in spades. We made so many bad decisions. And I made so many bad decisions. So I try really hard to give the team some grace on that point because I think it's just a difficult challenge launching a console.
Now, to switch gears a little bit.
Sure.
The whole second half of your book is about civic responsibility and your call to the civic life. You claim to not have any plans to run for office. You're very
right.
clear. But despite the fact this is very, very clearly important to you, and you mentioned earlier, and you mentioned in the book, your childhood dream of being a U.S. Senator.
Yeah.
Not a lot of kids, I think, daydream about being a U.S. Senator.
I was geeky in my own way. I wasn't a gamer, but I was geeky in my own way.
But now hear me for a second. You live in Medina, I believe.
Medina, yeah.
Is it Medina Mayor Robbie Bach? That's got a ring to it, right? I mean, because you're a young guy, you got plenty of time. It seems like why not pursue that path if that's what you're passionate about, and you have this. You are a retired guy with the choice of what you want to do with your life.
Yeah, but that's the key point, is I have choice. And what I've chosen is that I've chosen this path called civic engineering. And I think my second act, my second job and my purpose and second purpose in life is to empower other people to get engaged civically. So I really am an evangelist. I want to provide tools and techniques and ways for people to think about things. That's why I blog so much. If you follow me on LinkedIn, or on Twitter, on Facebook, I write a blog probably every 10 days. Sometimes it's about business, sometimes it's about civics. I'm trying to get the masses of people involved. If you run for office, you now have a different North Star. You have instantly changed yourself from being somebody whose goal in life is to get everybody involved in civics to getting people to vote for you.
True.
And so that changes the dynamic quite dramatically. And so I've consciously chosen to say, look, running for office isn't what I want to do because I want to have bigger impact than running for office could have.
Now it's that actually makes me sad hearing you say that. The fact that the fact that you genuinely believe that you can affect more change by not being in politics. Isn't the whole point of being a politician is supposed to help affect change for your community?
Well,
it's unfortunate that...
But remember, it goes back to individual skill sets, right? So I think there are people who are uniquely qualified to do this.
Yeah.
And there's some, unfortunately, who get elected who are uniquely unqualified to do it. That's a whole separate point. But I think there are people for whom it is a great calling, and for whom the lifestyle and the challenge and the things you have to do to be successful, where it makes sense and it fits in with what they want to accomplish. So instead, I think of it as, no, I'm empowering the broader ecosystem. The other thing I will tell you is politicians aren't the only ones who get to drive change. And I would actually tell you that I'm more hopeful about the change that gets driven by nonprofits and by businesses than I am about the change that's going to get driven from Washington, D.C.
Right. Like what Elon Musk is doing with a SpaceX or a Tesla, for instance.
Exactly, or what Mark Zuckerberg has decided to do. Remember, he doesn't even have a nonprofit, right? He has a foundation that has for-profit and nonprofit purposes, and he wants to drive social change. Bill and Melinda have chosen a way to drive social change.
Very good, yeah.
And so for me, the best situation is you get a local problem. In the book I talk about teen pregnancy in the city of Milwaukee, my hometown. And you get businesses, you get government leaders, and you get nonprofits to work together. That's how you drive change. And that's where my life is focused, is on figuring out how to help people to make that kind of change happen.
Now, we don't like to get into politics on IGN. We're about games. We're about, for everybody.
You need a game about this election. Trust me, this election will make a great video game.
I think that's already happened. But in the book, you admit it's an extreme measure, but you actually propose forming a new centrist political party. Do you think that society's frustration with our elected leaders on both sides is such that a legit third party is a realistic possibility?
Yeah, I do. I really do. I think there's a lot of institutional infrastructure that works against it, that makes it tough. But I do believe, and certainly hope, that when people come down to actually voting, they're going to realize that the extremes are bad, and that the middle part of the ecosystem, the middle part of political thought, the middle part of governing, is where the action is.
Yeah.
And finding ways to reach compromise, where compromise isn't conceding. Compromising is moving the ball forward.
Yes.
And I believe that will happen. Now, do I think, look, the Republican Party basically is in shambles right now, right? Maybe it'll come back and be the Republican Party of old, but right now you have a very conservative wing of the Republican Party, you have a traditional wing of the Republican Party, and then you have the Donald Trump wing of the Republican Party, which has nothing to do with being Republican. How's that going to get reshaped? I think it's quite realistic to think there's some Democrats and Republicans who could get together in the centrist part of the world and say, hey, we have more in common than we have with the rest of our party. And I think that would be a powerful thing to happen. Actually, having two parties is an unnatural and probably not healthy circumstance.
A couple more questions for you before I let you go.
Sure.
Because you have actual world change to affect, and I'm just going to go right about video games after this. No, I really do thank you for coming in. This has been a blast so far. For having for me gotten to cover Xbox for so many years to now be.
Well, we were laughing about that. We've known each other for so long, and I'm not sure. It's not like we've met a lot.
Yeah,
but we've been involved in the same business for a long time.
They keep guys like me away from guys like you. They don't want me asking too many questions.
I think it in fact was the reverse. I think they kept me away from the guys who knew games.
But most people don't get to retire in life at 49, not successfully. Anyway, so what are your big goals for the rest of your life? You've got the whole second half of your life ahead of you.
Well, and it's funny you say that, because I think I retired from Microsoft. I didn't retire from work. And so I really do. I think of my North Star. My book, I talk about purpose.
Yeah.
And the one sentence that describes what you want to do. And my purpose in what I do is empowering and informing an army of civic engineers. And that's a big statement, right? So that could be 30 years of work.
Right.
And I might not even succeed, but that's what I'm about. And it's why I do the things I do in the nonprofit space. It's why I do the consulting work I do in the civic space. Even the business work I do has elements of that in it. And so that's where I'm at. I do still doing a lot of blogging and writing. I'll probably write another book. I do a lot of public speaking on civic and business issues. I'm on now 5 boards, 4 of which are nonprofit boards, one of which is a for-profit board, Sonos. And I'm a small business owner with a business partner of mine. And so I'm far from retired, and all of those things have a common element of this North Star of civic engineering and getting people engaged.
So real quick, you mentioned 4 nonprofits. Do you want to mention them in some ways that maybe people can get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest nonprofit I'm involved with is Boys and Girls Clubs of America. And there's 1,100 Boys and Girls Club organizations, 4,000 clubhouses in the country. There's one near you. They serve 4 million kids, and there's another 15 million that aren't getting served who need help. 25% of our high school students aren't going to graduate. It's a tragedy. And that's what Boys and Girls Club's about. It's about taking kids from the time they're 5 or 6 and getting them successfully through high school with a path to the future. So for me, that's a deep passion. I've been a local board for almost 20 years, national board for 10 years. So that's really important. Second one I'm on, just real quickly, is Year Up, which is YEAR Up. And Year Up is this amazing job training organization which sort of picks up where Boys and Girls Club lets off.
Yeah.
Takes kids who have GEDs or high school education, gives them 6 months of IT training, gives them a 6-month internship, and then helps them find a job.
That's great.
And it's an amazing organization. Microsoft's very involved in that as well. And then I'm a personal passion, U.S. Olympic Committee. I'm a huge sports fan, giant sports fan. I played.
You going to Rio?
I am going to Rio.
Nice.
I am going to Rio. I'm a big competitive sports fan. My brothers and I were all Division I athletes and love sports. So that's sort of a personal passion, but also a nonprofit that gets no government money. And so we have to raise the money to send Team USA every place it goes.
Yeah. Is that the 4th one?
And the 4th one is the second Boys and Girls Club board, because I'm local and national.
Got it. Well, I'll ask you one last Xbox question before I let you go. I'm
Sure.
just curious. When you look out in the world and you see Xbox, you see the brand on billboards,
Sure.
T-shirts, in stores, on websites, how does it make you feel that that all these years later, it's this cultural force?
Yeah, it's interesting. I have 2 emotions, and they kind of compete with each other. One is, I think instantly of the team. I think of the people who made that happen. And while I was, quote unquote, chief Xbox officer and nominally the leader of the team, that logo, starting with that one, now with the new logo, is everywhere because of the work some very passionate people did. And I loved that team. And I keep in touch with them. It's really powerful stuff, and I give them great credit. And then in a personal moment, I have some personal pride too.
Sure.
I feel like there's some part of me that went with that work and that contributed to it in some small way. And so it's this combination of humility in front of the team, because I think they did the work, and some personal pride. And it's an interesting combination. And
it's a human combination.
It is a human combination, and I think it's it's cool to see something like that built. When you can look, it's different between now I'm a consultant, then I was a builder. And when you build something, it's always a little bit your baby.
Well, Robbie Bach, the book is Xbox Revisited. I'll go to center camera here for this. Hopefully we can get a good look at it. The man is Robbie Bach, the original chief Xbox officer. You can get this book. Is it in bookstores or most places go to the website?
You can get it. If you get it on my site, more money goes to charity.
Okay.
But you can also buy it on Amazon. There's Kindle versions. You can buy it in any bookstore.
All right. Get it where it's convenient for you. RobbieBach.com. Again, he was the original chief Xbox officer. Robbie, thank you so much for coming in, and best of luck with the book and with all your nonprofit efforts.
Thanks a lot, Ryan. Enjoyed being here.